Namaste friends, this is Jayalakshmi Ravichandran signing in on behalf of Magic Needles. In this video, I am going to show you how to work letter D in filet. This is a cursive letter D. So the very first row is 20 solid squares or 61 DCs. Second, third and fourth are one solid mesh at both the ends with 18 open mesh in between, or you can otherwise say one solid square on either side with 18 open squares in between them. Okay, and the fifth starts here. Fifth we read all odd rows, we read from right to left, and even rows we read from left to right and work. Okay, odd rows are the right side rows. One solid square, 8 open squares, 4 solid squares, 1 open square, 3 solid squares, 2 open squares and 1 solid square. This is row 5. Row 6, 1 solid square, 1 open square, 1 solid square, 2 open squares, 2 solid squares, 4 open squares, 1 solid square, 7 open squares and 1 solid square. Now we are with the 7th row. 1 solid square, 6 open squares, 1 solid square, 4 open squares, 1 solid square, 2 open squares, 1 solid square, 3 open squares and 1 solid square to end with. The 8th row. 1 solid square, 3 open squares, 1 solid square, 2 open squares, 2 solid squares, 3 open squares, 1 solid square, 6 open squares and 1 solid square. The 9th row, 1 solid square, 7 open squares, 1 solid square, 1 open square, 2 solid squares, 3 open squares, 1 solid square, 3 open squares, 1 solid square. Then the 10th row, read from left to right. 1 solid square, 3 open squares, 1 solid square, 3 open squares, 2 solid squares, 9 open squares and 1 solid square. 11th row, you read from right to left. 1 solid square, 4 open squares, 2 solid squares, 1 open square, 3 solid squares, 3 open squares, 1 solid square, 4 open squares and 1 solid square. Now the 12th row, read from left to right. 1 solid square, 4 open squares, 2 solid squares, 3 open squares, 3 solid squares, 2 open squares, 1 solid square, 3 open squares and 1 solid square. The 13th row, work from right to left. 1 solid square, 4 open squares, 2 solid squares, 2 open squares, 5 solid squares, 5 open squares and 1 solid square. This is the 13th row. Now 14th, 15th and 16th rows, asymmetrical rows with 1 solid square on each side and 18 open squares in between, and the 17th one is 20 solid squares, or you have 61 DCs. When you are placing DCs, you will place DC on DC, and then in chain spaces you will place 2 DCs. So that way you will get 61 DCs and it becomes a nice square. Thank you friends for watching. Let me meet you with letter E in the next video. Thank you friends.